This is Roy Cervantes, retired Border Patrol Class 230 out of Rio Grande Valley sector and author of my book, Never Wake Up a Sleeping Dragon. And you're listening to Old Patrol HQ Podcast with La Voz de la Frontera, Arturo Catarina.
Greetings and welcome to episode 27 of the Old Patrol HQ Podcast. I'm your host, Gil Maza, Class 313 out of San Diego sector. Today, we interview retired Old Patroller Rogelio Cervantes, Class 230 out of Del Rio sector. Roy shares about his career in the patrol, his experience as a published author, his battle with PTSD, and what led him to write his award-winning book, Never Wake Up a Sleeping Dragon. It's a truly delightful and insightful conversation. Come take a listen. Good morning, Roy, and welcome to the Old Patrol HQ Podcast.
Hey, good morning, man. Thanks for inviting me to do this. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, we're excited to talk to you about your career in the patrol, your background, and then especially the fact that you have become a published author. And we'll talk a lot about that as we go. But let's start out by just introducing yourself to the people that are listening. Your background before the patrol, and then what led you to join the Border Patrol.
Well, just a little bit about my background. I spent 4 years before the patrol in the military. I was a bomb dog handler. I did some tours overseas and here in the U.S. and I trained those my bomb dog from being basically green. He had no detection or anything, and I trained him on 9 different explosives, and took him out to the field and had a great time and then really enjoyed that part of the military, the K9 part of it, but after 4 years, I was pretty much burnt out of being on call all the time. I never really had any free time as a bomb dog handler. I was the only dog handler around, and so I got a lot of call outs nonstop. And back then, we didn't have cell phones, so I had a pager with me that was constantly going off, and
I remember those
on and off base. And so I was glad to finally do my 4 years, and I separated with the honorable discharge and came back home and applied for the Border Patrol.
What branch of service were you in?
I was in the Air Force.
Okay. Well, I won't hold that against you as a former Marine. And were you married already with family?
We had it made. Our chow halls were were the best. It's like eating at Luby's every day.
I'll say we loved getting stationed in the Air Force bases. We absolutely did. It was like going off and being on vacation for sure. Now, during this time, were you already married with family?
No, I was single.
Okay.
I didn't get married until my first year in the patrol. As a matter of fact, we had already set our married date. And when I got orders to Del Rio sector, so I had to take 2 days leave as a trainee before I went to the academy and got married, and then went to the academy.
Oh my gosh!
So that was the way it was. So it was either that or reschedule the date, which wasn't an option.
Nah, yeah. So you took on that whole thing, marriage and the Border Patrol all at once.
Yeah, that's right. And it was good for me. It helped me really buckle down at the academy and study, knowing that I had to finish, and I had to graduate and come back because I was already married,
Oh yeah. Now you had family to support. So what class were you in, and where did you go? Where did you attend your academy?
I was on class 230, and I attended at the academy at Glencoe.
Glencoe Rockstar.
Yeah, and so when I came back to Del Rio sector, my station was Bracketville, and there was supposed to be 10 other trainees that went with me to Bracketville, and they all got reassigned to Eagle Pass and Carrizo Springs, and I was the only one that stayed there. And during this time frame that's in the middle of a hiring freeze, so I was a trainee, the junior man at that station for like 5 years. They didn't receive any trainees for a long time. So I was a junior man. They would have these camping details up north, and everybody wanted to go on those. And so all of that before a detail roster went to the senior guys, and I just had to patiently pay my dues as a junior man for a little bit.
Wow, 5 years, and you didn't see
Yeah.
a weekend. You didn't see a weekend off that whole time, or what?
No, it was tough. It was tough to get. It was hard to get my days off, but we found ways around it. I mean, I had
Yeah.
good supervisors, old patrol guys that would take care of their people, so they were really good.
Oh, glad to hear that. Glad to hear that. So, what was the work like when you got to Del Rio in those days?
Brackenville was one of those unique stations that we did a little bit of everything. We did a lot of train check. We did a lot of brush. We had a brush crew. We had a highway crew. We had a checkpoint on Highway 90 between Uvalde and Brackettville,
Hmm.
and we had some river. On the line which is basically the portion of Kinney County that was on the river that we were assigned to. So on any given day, you could just be assigned anywhere, and that's what really made the station a lot of fun to work with. I really thought I would spend my entire career there,
Hmm.
but I spent 9 years there. Enjoyed the work, enjoyed the people there. I mean, I probably some of the best agents I ever worked with were in Brackettville Station.
Yeah.
I really have all those old patrol guys, hold them in very high regard.
Anybody in particular?
Well, there's a whole bunch of them. I don't want to leave anybody out, but
Ah, yeah,
there's
no, I
Ronnie
understand
Hobbs,
that.
people like Ronnie Hobbs, Steve Lamascas, Tony Molinar,
Hmm.
just a lot of people like that, Eliseo Rodriguez, that we wound up working really, really well together as a group. We're very tight. And it was the patrol back then was a lot different than now. When you had a birthday party for your kid, you'd have
Oh yeah.
90% of the people there were agents,
Yes.
and
Yes.
you would just have the invitations and put them in everybody's mailbox. And we were back then, we are probably a 30-man station, 25-man station, and you would put all the invitations in their mailbox, knowing that you were going to get 10 to 15 PAs that would show up at the party, and
Yes.
so you took care of them. You already knew their routine, what beer they drank, and what food they liked,
Yeah.
and that's what it was
How to
like.
get him home in one piece.
Yeah, how to get them home. And so if you didn't, the Border Patrol was your family. I mean, being from McAllen Mission area and being away from home, that was your family. That was the people that you would invite to your kid's birthday party or personal your birthday party celebration. Those were the guys that would show up, your station coworkers to these types of events.
Yeah, yeah. So when you were in Brackettville, what did you enjoy doing the most? And did you end up taking a canine for the patrol as well, or did you decide, hey, I've had enough of that?
I did K9 for about a year, but it wasn't the same, man. It
Ah,
wasn't the same as the military. I wanted it to be like that. I didn't enjoy it at all, actually, man. It just became to be such a chore, a very difficult thing to be a part of, and I was one of those guys that really liked to work the highway,
mm,
working smuggling cases or catching dope cases. That's what I really, really enjoyed doing and at Brackerville Station, and you had guys that specialized in the brush crew and they were very good at it,
mm-hmm.
and there were guys that like working the river, and there was guys that worked the trains, and then that's what they love to do. For me, I don't know, I just love to work the highway, and it was something that a lot of these guys showed me how to do and how
Yeah,
to be, what to think, what to look for, and the profiles. Even though you're not supposed to profile vehicles, right? We had
yeah,
them.
yeah.
We had what to look for, and running the 28th, you already knew, vehicles coming out of Del Rio or Eagle Pass that had that came back to an address in Dallas in the
Mm-hmm,
DFW
mm-hmm,
area,
mm-hmm.
where the vehicles on the back roads, especially leading up towards Campwood and Lakey, um, they had no business being out there,
Yeah.
and so that they stuck out, of course, and so I really enjoyed that part of Brackettville, of
Well, I'll
working
tell
it.
you, it's those are one of the things, I think, one of the segments of the patrol that people don't talk a lot about, right? We talk about the sign cutting, we talk a lot about the dragging, which was my favorite stuff, right? But
Right.
we have guys out there from the beginning of the Border Patrol till today, right? That thread that we've had, guys that are out there I've seen guys that are either canine or either just working the highways that will break a dope load before the dog even gets there,
Yeah.
or the dog handler gets there and he breaks the load before the dog even gets out of the truck.
Right.
So they're freaking good at, I mean, excellent at their jobs. I think, like I said, they sniff out dope even better than the dogs do sometimes. So there's something to be said about the fun of being a highwayman, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. I mean, you would work really close with DPS on the highway,
Mm-hmm.
and they would always want to know, hey, what are you guys looking for? Because they wanted part of the action, and they wanted to know what we were working and the profiles that we were working, and yeah, that station was known for the brushwork. They were
Mm-hmm.
the aliens when they came through our area. They had been walking through the brush for a couple of days already, and so these guys knew what drags to go to right off the bat. They would work a 682 piece, so they'd get there early, man. And these were the days before muster, so they would
Mm-hmm.
just come in, grab their keys, a cup of coffee, and it wasn't even 6 o'clock yet, and they were already out there at 5:30, 5:45, whatever time, cutting the drags with their flashlight, and
Yes.
jumping on a group. And back then, it was common for a group of 7 or 8, right? And there in Del Rio, they called them boys, right? You see it on the radio, hey, we got a group of 8 boys, and you would get the whole unit working that group
Yeah.
and an aircraft, a group of 8,
Yes.
and to me that was the way it was. I know California had their own, Arizona had their own thing, but for us, the whole group, the whole unit, everybody will call out what they had, what sign they had, and then they would jump
Yes.
on the largest group that they knew that they had a chance of catching up to in during your shift,
Yeah.
and that's what it was, and you'd work it, and sometimes you didn't catch up to them, and the
Yeah.
sun went down, and then they would mark it, and in the morning the supervisor sometimes would be the first one out there, getting on that sign again for the second day way up
Yeah.
north,
How about
and
that? Yeah. Yeah, well, you
so
know what? We the Border Patrol is one big family, but I firmly believe that every sector has its own identity, and even within those sectors, every station has its own identity, right? Its own
right.
spirit, its own camaraderie, its own, family situation. So everybody kind of gets nurtured and raised in their certain way in whatever station they go to, and then they move on from there. And so what did you do? You spent 9 years in Bracketville, and then where did you go from there?
Well, from Brackett, I transferred to back then it was Mercedes Station,
Mm-hmm.
and or Club Mer they called it, right?
Club
And
Mer.
so I got there, and the culture, the environment there was completely different from where I came from. We didn't do sit downs in Bracketville. We went straight out to the line, and you brought your
Yeah.
lunch, And so I showed up with my tricky bag, my lunch on day one, and I knew some of the guys there already, from other stations, and they started going through my tricky bag, before muster. They were saying,
Really?
you don't need toilet paper here.
It,
Throw it, you
those,
don't need you don't need you don't need wire cutters. You don't need this and that. Brush keys. You need brush keys. So they were making fun of my tricky bag, and I found out pretty quick that the way things were done there were a lot different. We were a line station,
mm-hmm.
and so a lot of the times when the sensors went off, if you weren't right there and then within several minutes response, they were over the levee and in a they would either get picked up or they would be in a house already.
Ah.
Some of these colonias are really close to the river, so minutes away, and
Mm-hmm.
or they'd be picked up by a taxi or something like that. So I had to learn a different way of working traffic than what I was taught and learned in Bracketville. And so we did some farm and ranch back then, checking a lot of the farmlands there, which I really enjoyed to do. It was, I mean, they were there picking onions, picking melons, and we
Yeah.
already knew. And I mean, you lose half the field, unless you go with 2 or 3 agents and you fill up 2 Suburbans, and you were done for the day. That's all you could do, and
Yep.
you would bring them in, and so back then when I got to Mercedes, we only worked day shift and evenings. We weren't working midnights. Just those two shift works. Unless they had info that there was dope coming in, something like that, then they
Mm-hmm.
would have a skeleton crew of agents that wanted to work mids for until they worked and you worked the traffic. But that was basically it. The last guy on the evening crew to leave would close the gate, and then the first guy coming in for day crew at 6 or 7, they would open the gate and come in,
Yeah.
and that was really probably one of the last stations that was like that. where you only work 2 shifts. Everybody else was a 24-hour operation except
Yeah,
us,
yeah.
you know.
I,
And
I
so
didn't even know that happened.
yeah, that was why part of the reason that it was called Club Mer,
Mm.
you know, and it was the work was really the station was really laid back. It was one of those stations where there was a lot of there was a lot of traffic to work, and there was a lot of drugs to work on the different parts of the AUR, especially at shift change.
Hmm.
But it was really different than Brackenville. It was a completely different station. Like you talk about, every station, every sector has a different tempo and their
Yeah,
different
different
culture and a
identity. Yep.
different identity, and this identity was different. And then we had several changes of PICs, and you had a PIC that came in that wanted to change the culture there. Now he didn't want to be known as Club Mer anymore.
Ah,
You know, he wanted
yeah.
to be known as a different station and going to 24 hour, working midnight shift now. And
Hmm.
which I'm okay with. I like the midnights back then they didn't hurt as much as they did in my 50s or 40s.
Yeah.
It was still where a lot of activity was going on. And so we that PIC brought us up to being a 24-hour operation. And
Ah, okay.
it also happened that they started growing the station. We went from 35 agents to starting receiving a ton of trainees for Operation Rio Grande at the time.
Hmm.
So um,
And from there?
and from Mercedes, from Westlaco, I promoted as an FOS to Falfurias at the
Okay.
checkpoint. And that checkpoint, back to what the different culture, different environment.
Are we
Fal is
talking about Falcatraz?
Alcatraz is. I never thought I'd take a position there, but I did. And is to me, it was just the most productive checkpoint in the Border Patrol. It was just always a lot going on. You had good soups, you were going to be okay. If you had
Hmm.
new supervisors with very little experience, you would have to be more involved. But the agents there were top notch. You had a lot of good um, dope catchers. They were good with the dog or good without a dog.
Yeah.
A lot going on. And so from Falfurias, I transferred to Fort Brown, and then I went to Rio Grande City, and then I went to Sector where I retired.
Okay.
And really, I mean, I retired at 53. I always thought. I still remember, like, going back to Brackenville. I still remember when I passed my 10 month and I went to the station. Uh, Supervisor threw me the keys and said, "Hey, go to the line, man. Go to the river." And I remember driving to the river like it was just yesterday, knowing I was going to stay till 57. You're going to have to kick me out of this job.
Hmm.
But you fast forward, I was 53, and a lot of health issues started catching up to me. And the doctor said, "Hey, you can either make a change in your employment, right,
Yeah.
or you might not make retirement, man."
Really?
So some of these changes I had, man, I was just super exhausted. And I'll talk about it in a little bit. Mainly, and I can go to it right now, really. But like having some disabilities um, from my military service really caught up to me in my 50s. Mainly sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea.
Hmm.
And so when I did my sleep study, I was waking up 72 times in 1 hour.
Jeez.
So I mean, I'm sorry, I was holding my breath, right, and waking up, startling 72 times at different levels, right, in 1 hour. So when you put that in an 8 hour shift, in an 8 hour sleep session or 6 hour session, then I wasn't getting very much long term sleep that you
Sounds
need to
exhausting.
recover. So the toll it was taking on me was heavy, man. When I went to the doctor and he says, "Hey, this your disabilities are catching up to you, man, and there's really nothing that can be done, right, that other than the CPAP machine, right."
Hmm.
And so the CPAP machine helped a lot, but anybody that's ever used one, it's not as easy as saying, "Hey, just put on the mask." You deal with a lot of leaks and stuff with your mask at night and stuff. So,
Yeah.
but you do feel better when it does stay on, and you do wake up. You do feel the difference.
Yeah.
That's because what happens without the mask is you wake up carbon dioxide build up in you because you've been holding your breath. You're not breathing correctly, and your heart has never experienced a resting period, so it's always beating like you're awake, and it doesn't slow down and stuff. So it does take a toll on your body in that you're very sleepy. You have these headaches, from not sleeping well, and still being an FOS on the shift. It's just, man, it was just killing me. Just making it to work was hard. Driving to work without
Yeah.
falling asleep was very, very hard for me. So the best decision I made was, I got with my family, say, hey, you know what, I'm going to retire. And I walked in. I was a special operations supervisor at Sector at the time, and I walked in to the chief. The deputy at the time was Chief Ortiz, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I walked in and say, sir, I'm done at the end of the month, man. I'm going to retire. It's like, what? I can't believe that. I said, yeah, and I never told anybody I retired for health reasons, but I knew it was time to cash in my chips per se, right?
Yes.
And move on. And I think everybody in the patrol has to make that decision and know when that time comes,
Mm-hmm.
and walk away. And I always said when that time came for me, I was just going to walk away and never look back, as far as wanting to go back.
Yeah.
I still get together with a lot of my Border Patrol friends. I'm in a lot of retiree text groups and active
Mm-hmm.
text groups, right? And we text each other daily, and it's a
Yes.
way to stay in touch. And it's really, sometimes it's funny, humorous, and brutal, but most of the time it's just, hey, man, how you doing, type of thing, and
Yeah.
catching up and critiquing the Cowboys brutally, critiquing the Border Patrol. The can't
Yeah.
believe the way the what's happening in the patrol right now is just crazy to me. I never thought it would be like that.
It's heartbreaking.
It's sad. It really is sad to see an organization like the patrol drop to the level that it is, and it's a lot of different contributing factors to that. I
Of
think,
course,
like,
yes.
I know that you hit on them time, and I want to encourage you to keep speaking truth, man. That's
Whew.
we really need that, and don't be silenced by the naysayers, man, and the people that critique. You have the support of a lot of retirees that I know, and a lot of the agents that I speak to that are still out there on the line. My brother is in the patrol.
Mm-hmm.
He's stationed in Rio Grande City, and he's a big reason why. I mean, I'm a big reason why he came in the patrol. And
Yeah, yeah.
I have a nephew that just took the exam. And that's the amazing thing also about the patrol is the generations of family through the years
Yes.
that wind up joining the patrol, man, because of it, because of the legend and the reputation the patrol
Mm-hmm.
has. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
and sadly that's changed a lot. It's really heartbreaking to see what's happening right now. It
Well, you know
really
what,
is.
Roy? What we were talking about earlier, right, is the fact that one of the things I wanted to accomplish in my old patrol business and things like that in my social media persona was to keep that connection between the old patrol and the young patrol, and to demonstrate that that thread exists from that very first patrol agent in charge. Patrol inspector, right, to today's CBP Border Patrol agent, right? Because we're still technically U.S. Border Patrol under the umbrella of CBP.
Right,
That has
right.
not changed. And we still have those legendary sign cutters. We still have those
Oh yeah.
legendary highwaymen. We still have those guys out in the field that if they had been born, if they had been in the patrol 10, 15 years ago, we'd be talking about them as old patrol legends right now.
Right.
And so I believe that thread is still as strong as it ever was, even in the midst of the environment that we're working in right now, which, yeah, as you well know, and we won't get into that part too much in the fact that, right, because you know what happens when you get me started with that. but
Yes.
um but
And that's
they
okay too, Gil.
well,
That's
yeah,
okay
sure,
too to
but
get into
this is
that.
not about me, right? We're talking about you today, but
All right.
they are in the worst border security breach and illegal immigration event in the history of America, not in the 100 years of the patrol, right? But in the history of America. So we can leave that conversation for another time. But I do appreciate your kind words of encouragement. So you end up retiring, right, as an SOS from the sector, and then you decided to take on a whole new career, and that was becoming an author.
Yes, I've always uh written for therapy, per se, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the stories that I would write, I would throw away a lot of the times or press delete or just kind of put them aside through the years, and like I said at the beginning, earlier in the interview, that I have a disability rating with the VA, right?
Yes.
And so I'm in a counseling session with at the VA, and she asked me what I do, right? What do I like to do? And back then, I like to run a lot. I told her, I play a lot of chess because it's relaxing to me. First thing in the morning, I play chess with online, with people around the world, and I write. So she asked me what I write about, and I told her mainly children's stories. And so she wanted to read one of my stories, man, and I said no. I was very private about it.
Yeah.
I was super private about it. I didn't feel good about it, and so maybe like 3 sessions later, I took her a story, and she read it, and she said, you need to publish this story. And sitting there in front of her while she read my story, it was, I might as well have been naked in front of her. That's how uncomfortable I was.
Wow.
Because
Yeah.
when I write, I try and make the reader feel something, whether it's empathy or anger or whatever it is. I
Mm-hmm.
try and have the reader feel something, right? Whatever it is. And so to do that, I have to put some of my own personal experiences or feelings into it a little bit. And
Yes.
the way I write, sometimes one of the techniques I use is I sit down the way I am now, right? And I'm sitting in a window, and whatever I want to write about is happening on the other side of the window, and I just write what I see, right? Very visual oriented in my writing. And
Yes.
that's one of the things that's how I tend to write. So anyway, I took the doctor's advice, and I went ahead and submitted the story. And I had submitted stories before this to a publisher, right? And I never heard anything back, which is a common thing, and so I just kind of forgot about it.
Yeah.
But on this one, I did, and it helped that there's a yearly event for veterans called the National Veterans Creative Arts Festival,
Mm.
and it's a top-notch event that they hold at the VA and the American Legion hold across the country. They moved this creative arts festival. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not,
No.
but they moved it around. I had never heard of it, right? And she encouraged me to enter this story into that competition, and it's not just a writing competition. It's for artwork for veterans that write or draw or weld or woodwork.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever art there is, you can submit it, right? And they have these different categories in writing and in artwork that you submitted. And I entered this story in the short story category, and to my surprise, it won first place. In the national competition. And so they fly you to that year. It was in Petersburg, Florida, and they flew me and my wife over there. Every first place winner gets flown to this festival, and um, you're there for a week. They
Yeah.
house you, they feed you. You go to this arts festival, which is really really cool. You meet veterans from all over. You meet a ton of people, and so when it won, I went there, and I was part of the writers event, and I was just really blown away by this event.
Yeah.
If anybody, any listener here, it writes or is into artwork, you really need to look up this event and submit and try and be a part of it.
Yeah.
And so I published this story, and boom, man, people were very, very interested in this book because it's really unique. It
What was the name of it? What was the title of it?
and so the name of the book is this one. This is the book. It's called
Oh,
Never
so
Wake
this
Up.
is okay. So
You're
this is
talking
the
about
one.
this
That's
one?
the one you submitted. The one you sent me.
Yeah, Never Wake Up a
Okay.
Sleeping
Okay.
Dragon is a story. It's a book that won first place, right? But when I wrote it, let me backtrack a little bit.
Yes.
When I wrote this book, and she encouraged me, she also encouraged me to step out of my comfort zone in writing. And so I was always just writing little short stories for children. A lot of them were stories that I would tell my sons when they were children as a bedtime story. They would say, "Dad, when I would put them to sleep, tell me a story," because I could just out of the blue create a story for them, you know. And
Yeah.
to this day, they remember these stories, you know, and they say, "You got to write this book, Dad. You got to write this book, Dad, and this one, right?" Because they would remember these stories that I would just on a whim just create for them, you know. And so she encouraged me to get out of my comfort zone and consider writing other types of writing. And so I wrote my first novel. It's an audio book called Texas Story.
Oh, okay. I
And
thought you
that
had done that first.
yeah, so I well, this book took about a year. This one
Okay.
to
Yes.
publish and stuff like that. And so the other one, because it's an audio book, came out first because it's a quicker process. The
Okay.
audio book, there's no illustrations, no publisher, for example.
Yes.
So when I wrote the Texas Story, it I did it more also for part of the your resume building as a writer. You know, you'll say, "Hey, I wrote a novel. It's an audio book. It's there," to kind of add some legitimacy to my writing, right?
Okay. Yes.
And so then I didn't stop there. I wrote I she even challenged me even further and said, "Hey, write two parallel novels that have nothing to do with each other." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" You know, I got to go back and forth. So I did that, and it was very, very difficult to do, but I did it,
Yeah.
and it was it's a sequel to a Texas Story called The Rise of Pristolero, which I really like because it's about a Catholic priest who winds up being a gunfighter because to protect the people in his town, and it's a fictional town that I created called Guadalupe here in Texas, and this priest um, makes a stand for his people for the people, right? He's a French
Yes.
priest.
Yes.
You know, he's one of those oblate, what they call back then oblate in the 1800s. They were oblate fathers, and they traveled up and down the Texas border area, founding missionary churches. You know, and so this guy, this priest, this fictional character, um, founds the Guadalupe Church in the city of Guadalupe that I created, and in there is where he has to make a stand because of the violence in town, and so it's called The Rise of Pristolero. Really excited about that
Oh,
one.
I
You
like it
know,
already.
and
Who's gonna play the pistolero in the movie?
well, you maybe you, man. I don't know.
Oh man.
So I and the parallel novel that I was working on is called The Last Ones, right? It's
Mhm.
the second novel that I was writing that, and they're both done now. I just haven't approached a publisher with them yet. And The Last Ones is completely different, unique that I have never worked on, and it's about the last groups of people on earth that have yet to hear the gospel
Mm.
and where they're at and the missionaries that gets God selects to take the gospel to them and what happens in the process, you
Wow.
know. And
Yes.
so I'm excited about that book as well, that novel, and um, what is happening as these missionaries are trying, because they don't know that they're approaching the last ones, that they're
Right.
going to take us right, and the last ones don't know that they're the last ones either.
Yes.
And so it's just an incredible. I had to really bounce my ideas. I would call out friends, and I would bounce ideas off them at random. Be surprised if I ever call you and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?
Hey, I
And what do
would.
you think about that?"
That
And
would be
so
awesome.
I always would bounce ideas off of them for both of those. And then from there, now I ventured into script writing, and I just completed my first script work. It came out at about 150 pages. I need to narrow it down to about 120,
Hmm.
and I'm excited about it. I'm gonna put it on a platform called the Blacklist, and that's where writers put their script work, and they get critiqued, and sometimes they generate a lot of activity on it.
Yeah.
That writing gets pushed to the front, and it gets produced, or it gets a screenplay or whatever happens to it. So I'm excited about this story. Also, it's called the Peach Club, right?
Hmm.
And it's about this kid, right, that has a Peach Club, right? These are girls, right, that he has a list,
Yeah.
right? girls he's either nice to him or that he has had a crush on, maybe, right? And so the story takes him from from elementary school all the way through when he is an adult, right? But there's a reason for the Peach Club, right? And so without ruining the script,
Yep.
maybe someday you'll hear about it,
Well,
right? And
I'll probably get the
it's
book because I like buying. I buy all Border Patrol author books.
serious, all
Yes,
right,
I do because I love reading them. I love, especially if I get an opportunity to speak to the authors, right? I love the background. I love, especially like what you're talking about right now, right? The story about the pistolero right away. I'm like,
yeah,
oh, you know, it
yeah,
almost excited me as much as the next Godzilla that's coming out, right?
right,
You know what I mean? I get thrilled for that. So
yeah,
that's a really though. It's amazing to hear you talk, how excited, how passionate you are about the subject. When at one point you couldn't get anybody to talk to you, right? This person brought you out
right,
and said, "Hey, start writing this kind of stuff,"
right,
and now you are
right,
producing these works. And so Texas Story was the first one that you actually published as an audiobook, right?
right. That was the
Um,
first one.
yes, and then you got all these other books in the work, but I do want to talk to you in particular about Never Wake Up a Sleeping Dragon. First of
Yeah,
all, I want to thank you for my autographed copy. And
yeah.
I
You're welcome.
posted it for everybody to see because I want everybody to get a copy of this book. So let's talk a little bit about this one in particular. Tell me
Okay.
about, you know, the inception of this book. What happened to got you on the road to write this book?
So I use personal experiences to write this book. It's a PTSD book that I wrote from the child's perspective, right? From the
Mm-hmm.
child's point of view. And I do have PTSD, right? There was a point where I couldn't say that, right, in the
Yeah.
patrol, right, because I was really really afraid of getting a fitness for duty,
Rubber Gun Squad.
and I
Yep.
want to talk about that a little bit because it's important because I saw in 28 years I saw two agents get a fitness for duty, not for the physical part of it, but for a mental issue that happened. And I said, man, that's not going to happen to me. I got a family,
Yes.
I got children. I can't support my family on a VA disability check, and I was
Yes.
afraid. I was afraid of increasing that rating, um, uh, and having a rating that is unemployable versus employable. Right. I was just
Right.
concerned about the unemployable part,
Yep.
and not being able to carry a gun and a pistol. And I know that there's a lot of veteran agents that are veterans, that are in the same boat. I waited, and
Yes.
a lot of veterans wait, and in essence, a lot of agents that are veterans, right? And I think that like me, they suffer in silence, like my health issues, right? You wind up suffering in silence, and you just suck it up and you go through, and then when you reach a point, then you file, right? Then you
Yes.
file, make your VA filings. And as I talk to more and more retirees, man, I'm blown away by how many veterans in the patrol that are getting ready to retire, that are stepping up and then submitting their VA claims over
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to mental health in the patrol, I really think that the patrol, and not just the patrol, but every law enforcement agency out there, has to bring mental health up to par with officer safety. And I don't think we're there anywhere
No.
close.
No, no,
You have
no.
officer safety where they preach it, you train, funding, whatever, right? But when it
Yes.
comes to mental health, it's lacking. It's lacking, and the patrol misses it. They're missing it, and you can tell that they're missing it by the numbers that are there. The VA misses it. You can tell by the numbers, And I'll use this example, Gil, is that the border patrol vehicles, they have a schedule A, B, and C, right? Maintenance, because you want to
Yep.
get as much mileage out of that vehicle, right? You want it
Yes.
to last as much as possible. Because when I came in, vehicles were in bad shape, man. You've heard the stories, right?
Oh,
So they
yes.
want to extend They want to extend. They have warranties and stuff, but they want to extend the service life of that vehicle. But for the agent, there's nothing like that. And I believe that every agent, especially after a critical incident or a divorce, a critical incident, whatever, they need to be brought in and have a mental health check done. Every agent, man, you have a background check every 5 years.
Yeah.
But imagine pulling an agent every whatever years and getting a mental health screening, right? Mandatory every whatever, or
Yeah.
have a metric that activates it and say, hey, you know what, you went through these things, you had a shooting, you had this and that, and so you need to go through this, and be prepared to do the right thing for that agent based on the doctor's recommendation, the right
Yeah.
thing, the correct thing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times the patrol, as a supervisor, I did it. You hand a guy the number to EAP and you think you did your job. That's it.
Yes.
I gave him I
Yes.
gave him I gave him
Yep.
EAP. Oh, you did? Okay, thank God. All right. Let's move on.
Your due diligence.
But that's nothing
No.
for the guy,
No. Yes.
And the patrol needs to do more for that, and I wish that somebody that was listening that's in that role that can step up and say, you know what, you're right, we need to do more. Recently, and this is an example, recently there were some retirees here in the Rio Grande Valley. They created this PTSD awareness event, and
Mm-hmm.
they invited doctors and clinic therapists and all that to speak at this seminar, and the Border Patrol sends nobody.
Yeah.
They sent one speaker. They sent a speaker to speak, but the stations couldn't just say, "Hey, look, let's spare 3 guys or 2 guys, and send them to this suicide awareness or PTSD awareness seminar." And out of all the stations, they didn't send anybody.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
the chief was invited, and she had somewhere else to do. I think there was a retirement in Laredo or something like that. But I was disappointed that the stations didn't send anybody, considering the number of agents that have committed suicide in the patrol.
Well, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
when I retired, I paid tribute to the 9 agents that I knew that were killed in the line of duty. Right,
Yes.
the 9 that I knew, and several of those I was working with. I was working on shift when they got killed, but there's no way that I could pay tribute to all these guys that committed suicide in 28 years that I knew. It was almost twice as many. By
Yes.
now,
Yes.
people are committing suicide that I still know when I was in service, and it's a subject that's really dear to my heart, and I really wish that, I mean, the patrol would do more.
Well, if I can interject here real quick, because I have my background in San Diego sector is starting the sector chaplaincy team back in 2006. And so I was the sector chaplain for all those years until I think 2008 when I became the national chaplain to a coordinator for all the sectors at that time. And nobody beats Border Patrol, Border Patrol peer support or chaplaincy when it comes to the things that we do best. In other words, taking care of agents during line of duty deaths, taking care of our agents in injuries, in attacks or assaults or illness. Okay, and Police Week, we are the premier agency. We not only take care of our own families during Police Week, we take care of a lot of the other nation's families that don't have the law enforcement structure in place to transport families, to do things like that. And for a long time, I was a strong believer, Roy, in the peer fellow agent peer support chaplain model. Okay, because it was basically it all boiled down to the agent that was the chaplain or the peer supporter. If they were a go-getter, a worker, people trusted, depended on them, could rely on them as an agent, then they would come to them in their time of need. But the environment was such, and we were getting real good. I mean, Chief Aguilar was the very first one to recommend to actually start announcing suicides as suicides.
Right.
And unfortunately, though, since those years, we've been kind of backtracking a little bit and losing ground. The point I'm trying to make here is that the model of a peer support EAP, I mean, a peer support chaplaincy fellow agent model, I don't think it serves this agency in its present form anymore. Okay. I think
right.
that our agents have to be able to look outside CVP and DHS to be able to go and because they don't trust the management. They don't
No,
trust the
no,
administration. They don't trust the
no,
management to
no,
say, I'm having suicidal thoughts. Okay.
right,
They are effective, but our peer support and chaplaincy agents should not be the ones counseling people on suicide or PTSD and anything else like that. They simply don't
right.
have the qualifications, right? So I am starting to believe strongly that while peer support and chaplaincy has their spot, that they're better than
Right,
anybody
absolutely,
in the country at.
absolutely.
Not in the mental health counseling department, no. And
Right.
our EAP system, right? Having to call somebody, try to get an appointment, and to try to get and work that whole rigmarole just really isn't working. And what I tell people now is, you know what? Even if it costs you, if you are in dire straits, if you feel like you're in danger for your life, for your well-being, for your health, even if it costs you money, so what? Go outside the agency, go to military suicide intervention counseling, go to all. Okay. So I think there's been such a shift now. And unfortunately, when it comes to suicide awareness, when it comes to mental health awareness, we're not moving forward. We're not making progress. We're actually
No,
backtracking.
yeah, we are, and in this culture, um, in the border patrol, the law enforcement culture, the mental health is still something that we push to the corner.
Yes,
It's
still.
something that, and we leave it there where it's uncomfortable because management, the minute they identify it, well, they have to do something about it now,
Yeah.
and they don't want to get caught holding the bag. But it's time to really put your mouth where your money is when it comes to the agents, and
Yes.
more. And this thing about, hey, we're bringing comedians now to the to the sector now, and this and that. It's just scratching the surface.
Yes.
And it's not really getting to the heart of the matter of suicides. And sometimes you really, when an agent commits suicide, and when I talk about an autopsy, I talk about a quality of life about this person. What are the commonalities that these agents have when they commit suicide? And sometimes the very first thing that I look at, and I won't name anybody specifically, is
Right.
was that guy a veteran or not? Number one,
Yeah.
right? Was he a veteran? I always look at that. And the second thing I think about is their family, right? And I always think about their family because the very first person that knows something is not right with that agent is the wife.
Yep.
That is your first layer.
Oh,
She
yes.
is the one. She is the one that knows that something's not right with Roy Cervantes
Oh my
or Gil.
God. Yeah, they know
And I've been
they
married. I've
know
been
your
married 34
feelings.
years.
They know your
I've
feelings
been,
before you do, right? They're obnoxious
yeah,
that way. They're like,
yeah,
"You're angry." No, I'm not. Yes, you are. You're angry.
yeah.
And then a few minutes later, yeah, yeah, I'm angry. So they know ahead of you. But tell me why, tell me why um a book on, this book, the book on PTSD and dealing with a parent that struggles with that obviously, it's not a normal situation for the kids. Why this book?
So, when I first started this story, I was in left field with it. I had this idea about a story about a dragon, and this kid that has this last dragon in his closet, it's like a genie dragon type of idea, and then it kind of evolved into this, you know. But the main reason that it evolved into this is because my sons, my boys are now they're 30 and 28, but when they
Mm-hmm.
were growing up, they couldn't just jump on their father when I was asleep, working shift work.
Yes.
They couldn't come and jump on me because of the startling effect, and they couldn't, the house had to be quiet. They couldn't be jumping around or anything. The house, my room had to be really dark. I had to put blankets on the windows so it could be
Yeah.
dark and
Yeah.
quiet, and they knew they couldn't go in to my bedroom, right? And so what happens is with my sons is that they were blaming themselves.
Oh.
They blamed them. You have two. These are just my sons. They would blame themselves that they were the problem, and they're not. And
Yes.
I would hope that this book allows for agents to have these types of conversations with their children, because if I could go back, I would have had these types of conversations with my kids, with my boys, because when I finally told them, I said, "Hey, this is what's going on with your dad," it's like a light turned on into them in their heads, right? And they were
Mm-hmm.
older, they were in their 20s, and all of a sudden, they understood their father a lot better.
Oh, yes.
It's like now these things that they were thinking like, man, why does dad have this against me? Well, your dad doesn't have
Yeah.
anything against you.
Yes. Yes.
Your dad is, why would he get real quiet and sit in a dark room?
Yes.
Sometimes coming home from work, he just didn't want to be bothered, or before work or whatever. On his days off, he just get in there and just didn't want to. He just closed the door. And
Yes.
so they understood some things about their father. And this book, I think you've read the story, and it I didn't expect it to resonate as big as it has in the veteran community, because I get calls to go speak to veterans
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
now a lot. I speak at schools and like book fairs, that type of things, all the time. I have readings scheduled September, October, November. Now that school opened up again, but I was very surprised when I was getting calls from veterans groups to come that read the book, and they wanted me to come and speak about this book. Because in the book, a child is in essence, he's going to bed, and there's a dragon asleep in his bed. He's faced with the dilemma of whether he wakes up the dragon, or does he let him sleep there,
Mm-hmm.
and does he find another place to sleep without ruining the book for people, right?
Yes.
And so they it's also a good book to teach children empathy and kindness, right? But in this book, I used up my personal experiences with my two sons, and used that in writing this book, and what it was like for them, right?
Yeah.
Living with a father who has some PTSD issues.
Yeah. I read through this book 4 times, and every single time, the very first time I opened the book, right, it looks like a kid's book. It really, I mean, it the artwork is really wonderful. The biggest, I think it's got like the biggest paragraph. It might be 5 lines long, and the smallest
Yeah,
one is 1 line. Through this whole,
right.
you're seeing this whole page, and you got all this artwork with one little line there. And at first you're
Yeah.
like, maybe it's a little too simple, right? But I'll tell you something. After, I read it initially, then I read it again, and I think the genius of this book is that you took such a deep, complicated, could be complicated, psychological monstrosity, and you simplified it down to the bare minimum. Didn't take away any of the power of it. You didn't take away any of the force of it or the magnitude of the issue, but my God, you just laid it out and presented it in such a beautiful, just an amazing way, that this little kid, we're walking with this little kid in his mind's process and how to deal with his parent like that. So I am just, I feel special that I read this book, and I feel even more special that I recognize that you're a genius writing it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. I when I first submitted the original copy to the publisher, I got it back in red, man, like a memo from
Oh,
hell, like submitting your
oh
memos
God,
to
yes,
off the chain,
yes.
and they kick it
Oh,
back, and it looks like
now
it has
I'm getting
blood all
Now
over it.
you're triggering my PTSD. Okay. Oh my gosh,
And
the
it has,
red. Oh.
yeah, and it's all red, and it's all scratched out, and that's how my manuscript came back. And I said, wait a minute, this story won first place the way it is. And so
Yes.
they kick it back to me, and I'm like, wow, man. And so my wife says,
what was their biggest criticism, would you say?
that there was no grammatical or spelling errors. The one of the things is in your writing, sometimes the way we in law enforcement write, I-44s or
Ah,
statements, right? D-166s, right?
yeah.
We wind up a lot of the times jumping around from present to past tense because of the way things happen, right? And so you
Yes.
jump around in the ten, and so initially the story had that style of border patrol type of writing,
I
which used
remember
to
that.
bore me.
Yes.
The writing, I've always had this creative ability to tell stories and write stories, but the border patrol style of memo writing and I-44 requirements and G-166, it bored me, man. As a writer, it frustrated me, man.
Oh,
It was to frustrate me that now uh, I start off my day every morning as I'm drinking coffee, and I try and block the first 2 hours to write
mm,
and that kind of sets the tone for my day. And
yeah.
sometimes I have to stop because the writer's block. I don't have anything to say, so I play chess for a little bit, and
Yep.
I come back to it, and I pick up and I start going. And me now, I have these stories lined up to continue writing. I just finished this manuscript, and I'm already starting my second one. Another one.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different style of writing when you write a playwright, like a manuscript, script writing for like a
Hmm.
play or a movie. It's a different style of writing that I had to learn how to do it, right, and the style of it. And so I like it. I just went in there, taught myself, spoke to some people that have done it, and read, kind of had to read a lot of scripts, like some of the movies from our generation, and even the
Yeah.
Top Gun movie script. I went
Yeah.
in there and I wrote I read, well, not all of it, but I kind of jumped around through it to see how the writers were writing that down, and so I learned a lot from that, and I ventured into it, and I like it. It's very relaxing, easier for me to write script work than a novel. A lot. The novels were really were not as relaxing. You're a little bit
Hmm.
stressful.
I could
But
imagine.
the children's book, this book, stories like this, I like to write about things that our writers are not writing about, and this I consider it a wellness book, kind of. Never
Yes.
Wake Up a Sleeping Dragon, and I
Yeah.
and I really think that wellness books like this are going to be big. They're going to be coming out more and more, especially now. I mean, when you go through, uh, 2 wars like Iraq and
Hmm.
Afghanistan,
Hmm.
you have a ton of kids out there, right? And
Yes.
who have parents or siblings with a PTSD issue, or issues, and in the Border Patrol, like me, a lot of agents, they wind up bringing this luggage into the patrol,
Hmm.
and then you experience critical incidents in the patrol, and so now that you have more luggage, more
Yeah.
baggage like that when
Yeah.
it comes to PTSD. And I know for me, the very first time that uh, on duty that an agent died, right?
Yeah.
It was the guy that it was an agent that I was carpooling to Bracketville with. We were carpooling, and we were checking a train in Spofford. I'll never forget, in January, and back then there was only 4 of us working, 4 or 5 of us. That's how big our station was, and I was carpooling with him, and it was my kid's birthday the next day, and I told him, I said, "Hey, dude, we got to be gone by midnight because, I got to get up in the morning and prepare for my kid's birthday." And I said, "All right,
Hmm.
I'll see you there." He would,
Yeah.
I was expecting to see him there, and so he said, "You know what? I'm going to follow the train out." And so I went to the station with the other agents, and we waited, and he never showed up. You know,
Yeah.
and we went out and looked for him, and he had rolled over
Ah.
and was ejected and killed. And so in that, to me, when that happened, the guilt of leaving him out there, just the whole trauma of seeing what happened to him, pulling him out from under his vehicle and
Oh.
everything. It that type of pain, it stuck with me, Gil. It stayed with me. It didn't. It was not like when your grandparent passes away or your mom, when you go through the grieving process and time, and you're able to deal with it with time, better,
Yes.
This whole incident that first happened, I was in the patrol very long, and it stuck with me. It stuck around. It didn't go anywhere. No matter how far I ran or how hard I worked out, I had stopped drinking. I had done all the right things that I was supposed to do. And it stuck around though,
Yes.
And so I learned a lot. I learned a lot in that process. I learned a lot about it, but it changed me. There were some changes that happened there on that night, forward, and it was hard to. And it played actually a big reason why I transferred out of there, right? Because where it happened I mean, we worked there just about every day, so to go there every day it's gonna be very difficult for me to deal with,
Yes.
It was just a real bad trigger for me, and so I talked to some friends at the office and said, hey, look at this, look at transferring out. And so how do I do it without triggering the big fear for me, right? The fitness for duty thing. I was not doing well, but so I transferred that on a compassionate. It's my wife's illnesses to transfer out, and that's what I did back then.
Yes.
And so I got a new start in Westlaco, away from it, and being away helped me tremendously to deal with it. And I really relied a lot on my faith, right, to get over this and through this. And that's where I really, what I mean is what I learned a lot is through that, how faith became a big part of helping me heal and get me past this,
Yes.
And the story I like to talk about, Gil, and I don't know if a lot of the podcasts, if they turn to speaking about your faith or not. I know you're a chaplain and stuff, but there's a story in the Bible about Paul and how he pleaded with God to take away
the thorn in his side.
The thorn in his side. He said he pleaded with God,
Yeah.
And that's something that I had done. Pleaded with God to take this, this pain, this agony, this suffering away from me,
Yeah.
And so Paul was suffering as well, And so God doesn't heal him. That's the incredible thing,
Yeah.
He does something better is understanding what he tells Paul. Your grace is sufficient for you. My grace is sufficient for you, and understanding what that means. And when I got a revelation of what that means, is it just opened up a new level of healing for me personally, it having gone through this,
Yeah.
And it affected me so much that when I retired, I also got certified as a chaplain, right?
Yes.
When I got out, and I said, you know what, I still, even though I'm out of the game, I'm going to have this in reserve in case I'm ever called in for whatever thing, I'm available, I would be available to speak to people. So when I go speak to veterans, to the veterans groups that we talked about, I tell them that. I tell them, hey, I'm here as, an author and a chaplain, to speak to you,
Yes. Yes.
And so
did you ever cross paths with any of our chaplains there in Del Rio?
Frank Lopez.
If you're embarrassed,
Frank?
if you're embarrassed,
No.
it's I understand.
Would you remember, was Frank Lopez in one of your group, Frank?
Frank, we're good friends. Yes, I know him well.
Well, Frank is my classmate.
Okay.
I know him very well. I know he ran for public office. Really nice guy.
Yeah. You're either proud or you apologize, one or the other.
When you talk to him, tell him I said hello, man. Frank is also a veteran, and we spent a lot of time together at the academy and in Del Rio.
Now he's one of my favorite people.
Yes, and he was always. He is one guy, I can tell you this, Gil, that in the patrol, and I wish we were more open to this, but there are guys in the patrol that being around them without them saying a word.
Yeah.
Right? You could be hurting, but for that time that you're there, they're going to take care of you. And it makes you stronger.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. That's Frank.
And so that was the circle that I was around with. Those were the, God, I don't know what to call them. That was the support I had.
Yeah.
Guys calling me and saying, "Hey, how are you, man? What's going on?"
Yeah.
And so these were the guys that say, "Hey, man, you're going to work with me tomorrow, man. You got it? All right, man." Those were the kind of guys that I was with. But Frank was different. Frank's approach was, "Hey, man, there's a men's group at my church. Why don't you come with me?" No, man, I don't want to go, because what are we? We're very close in the law enforcement community about those types
Yeah.
of things. And I would run into Frank around town or at training or something, and he would say, "Hey, man, why don't you come, man?" And so I went with him, and that's what really got me back into that faith part of it, and
Yes.
a very important part of my healing for that one incident, because there were others, man. Unfortunately, there was just so many to speak about,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's just, it happens in the patrol. Some are agents, some are not,
Yep.
and you just
Yep.
experience so much trauma, so many emotional wounds or moral wounds or whatever you want to call them, and
Yes.
you see and experience so much. And we were created in spite of that, seeing maybe a partner gun down or somebody, a child drown in the river or whatever, but we were created in a specific way where we could still function in spite of that. You can still be a
Yes.
father, still be a husband. You can
Anybody
still,
else would be devastated, right?
yeah,
And
you
you
still,
mentioned the Apostle Paul, and you said that God told him, right, my grace is sufficient for you. But the second part to that is he says that my strength is manifested in your
yes, that's
weakness,
correct.
right?
That's
And
correct.
that definitely, Roy, reflects in your writing. That definitely reflects in this book his strength, his grace, right? In your weakness, God's strength has brought itself through in the work that you're doing through your books and through your ministry, because that's what it is.
Right.
To outside, when you get called to speak, when you get called to read excerpts of the book and things like that. So that is strongly evident in you.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that, Gil. And back to this book, I never thought in 100 years, man, that
Yeah.
I would wind up publishing a book and then making plans to publish my second children's book. That's I'm pretty close to doing that.
Yeah.
I have the breakdown of the stories in the order that I want to publish them. They
Yes.
stockpiled through the years, and so I'm really excited about that step. I know that, and if there's agents out there that haven't taken that step, I know that they have stories, man.
Yeah.
Border Patrol culture,
Oh, yes.
the Border Patrol family, man. There's so many stories that need to be told,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I want to encourage them
There's a lot
to
of guys that do. And that's I
yes,
got, like I said, I got a whole library of books that have been authored by PAs, things like that.
yeah,
That I love to read because it brings me back to the field. It brings me the sights, the smells, the sounds, and those kind of
yeah,
things. Well, there's a couple of questions I have for you before we close down.
sure.
Okay. Number one, what do I have to sacrifice to get an advanced copy of that Rise of the Pistolero? Okay, you don't have to answer that now. You just think about it, all right? You think about it. And two, is there any possibility that you could write a book where the basic premise is it's the end of the world? I am a Marine Corps general left over with Salma Hayek, and we have to repopulate the planet. Is there a chance you're gonna might be able to put that together?
I'll make sure I get you a copy when it happens, and it will. Pistolero is a story that actually, real quick,
Yeah.
sometimes in developing characters, I think about people I've worked with.
Uh-huh.
And in this character, right, he wound up in a gunfight, and he winds up shooting, actually in the draw, he winds up shooting through his opposite hand, his weak hand, in the
Oh,
draw. He's drawing, and he was so quick with it
good.
that his weak hand got in front of his other one and shot a hole through his through his hand, right?
Yeah.
And there is an agent, right, that I work with, and I won't say his name, but he
We
knows
will.
who he is. We
Yep.
work together, and that happened to him at the And I told them that I wrote that into my book, right?
Yeah.
That the reason why I wrote it, right, is that character has that 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 damage to his hand after getting a slug through his hand. But I want to
Oh, that
thank you
guy.
again for inviting me to your podcast, man. I've enjoyed it. It's the first podcast I've ever done as an author, and I've
Mm.
truly enjoyed it. Thank you for making me feel welcome and at ease for your interview, and
Uh,
I really I can't thank you enough,
well, Roy, this is a couple of PAs having a chat, right? That's the way
Yes,
I like it, especially
yeah,
talking to the really old patrollers back in the sessions, in the session 60, section 65. I've talked to those guys, and I just listen with reverence and awe. But I'm the one that's honored here in listening to your story that you have shared with us, and I'm excited about your future books. And I hope we can come back and we can discuss the next children's book, or
yes,
once I get my copy of Pistolero, and we can talk about that one. I'm looking forward to that. But
yes.
thanks again for your time, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you, bro.
All right.
Take care. Bye.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the Old Patrol HQ podcast. Follow the links on the post to get Roy Cervantes books, and follow me at Old Patrol HQ on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and visit my website at oldpatrolhq.bigcartel.com.